I'm Rob Barker, hello. I'm a digital narrativist, I call myself, and journalist. I'm going to basically spend, well, hopefully about best part half an hour here with yourselves. We're going to talk about the film. We're going to hopefully, though, turn this into a bit of conversation. I'm aware that we've all been sat down for a rather long time, and we'll make sure that we can, well, bring you in, as it were. To start with, I'm going to just ask a couple of questions to get a little show of hands. Let's see, so who here had a ZX Spectrum? Raise your hand, please. Okay, interesting. Who had a Commodore 64? Oh, my word. Okay. Who's ever typed in a program listing? Good Lord, that's incredible. Okay, that's just for those recording. I think first of all was about 50%, second and third about 70%. Two more. Who'd rather be in 1984 than 2014? Interesting, let's keep a good eye out there. And I guess last one, who would buy David Darling's tadpole fishing in Mexico? Anyway, okay, thank you. Okay, well let's just quickly introduce the people we've got here. Gary, I notice you're not... Sure. Okay, well Gary Bracey may heckle from the wings, but we've got, on my left, Jeff Minter, founder and an ox that makes video games and light synths. Nick Alexander, manager of Virgin Games, Virgin Master Trike, and also CEO of Sega Europe for I think about 6 years.
That destroyed the industry.
Nicola and Caulfield, and special guest. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Nick Pelling, probably the most copied game of all time, Frag.
So I'm going to ask a couple of questions about the film, get our panelists' views, and then, well, hopefully attempt a little bit of time travel, because I don't know about the rest of you, but I think From Bedrooms to Billions is a very effective vehicle for travelling back through time, and I'd like to have a little bit more of that. If anyone's tweeting, then, well, I've been using the hashtag EGX build, so do feel free to use that. Anyway, Nick, I'm going to start with you because you're more or less the only middle-aged white dude on the panel. So it'd be good to kind of get your review. What attracted you to this story in the first place? I guess we need to pass you the mic down. No, you're good. Go ahead.
Are we talking Nick Pelling? Or Nick. So I always call
Oh,
Nick
sorry,
Nick.
sorry. Nick. Yourself, yeah.
I think what it was is, it's a story that we've been looking into about the last 10 years. And we just kind of thought, well, what did happen? You know, we had this, why aren't we as big as we used to be and everything? And what kind of fueled us to want to do the story more was the fact that every time we went and talked about this story to broadcasters and even for film investment as well, everyone said, there's not a story there, it's too niche, there's nothing to tell. And that kind of fueled us. And then we went to the BBC one day and got a complete lecture about how no one would be interested in this story and that. And so kind of that was the driving force behind it. We thought there is a good story there, we want to tell it. And it just kept pushing us. And there were other projects that we'd done along the way. But this one always kept coming back to us. Thought, this is a good documentary, we could make a good story here. And that was it really, wasn't it?
And it's a story that's taken some time to put together, isn't it? When did you first start?
We've been making it for the last 3 years. We thought it would take a year to make. We started off saying we were going to interview about 10 to 20 people. That grew into 147 in the end. It just kept going, and we thought, well, we can't interview that person and then not that person. It just felt like we had to get everyone's story in there. But of course that left us with about, how many hours of footage?
Just over 1,000.
1,000 hours. So to try and cut that down to 2 hours, 20 minutes, You know, the first edit that we did was 6 hours, and we were like, we can't cut this down. So, but you know, it was just like we felt we wanted to get everyone's voice in there. Everyone had a story, and the interesting thing was that as it went on, everyone was kind of saying the same story as to why it declined and why we've ended up where we are now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Maybe you answer this one. Were there specific things that people liked talking about, and specific things that it was really difficult to get people to talk about?
I don't think there was anything. I think one of the initial things was people to sort of break that sort of corporate mentality. Everybody we interviewed, most of the interviews were at least an hour plus, and we always started with questions which dealt with their earliest childhood memories of playing any form of game. So if you've got, you know, somebody that's used to sort of talking very corporately and sort of having all their sort of boundaries and everything else, when they start having to reminisce about their earliest memories involving games, it breaks it down. So by the time you get to the bit you really want to talk about, they're very, very open. And I think that's what we wanted to do with the film. The original idea with the film was it was going to be having a narrator. There was lots of ideas we had. We originally had approached Daniel Craig about doing the narration for the film, which he was actually up for. And in the end, it got to the point where we said, we don't need you anymore. Because we didn't want anybody in the film that wasn't relevant to the story. So what we didn't want was, and this is no disrespect to other productions, of a group of celebrities saying this is the way it was for them. We wanted people who were there to say this is how it was for me. And then it became no narration. Let's do an ensemble documentary, an ensemble documentary, which is a lot harder to edit, because then you've got to think about pacing so much more and making sure that you keeping it exciting, that it's moving and everything else, but at the same time making it so it's just many voices. It becomes a lot more difficult to edit.
It's very strange because obviously you're talking about that as a film now, but I think for Bedrooms Has Become Something which is, I refer back to what Gary said when he was talking about the program listings. He talks about it in terms of a kind of incantation and a kind of magic there. And I think there is definitely a kind of magic there. I guess, Jeff, I'll turn to yourself. Was watching this, because I believe this is the first time we'd seen it since, well, the first time we'd seen it actually. Was it like going back in time, or was it actually more like casting a new lens on where you are now, if you see what I mean?
Well, it was certainly an interesting recap. It was interesting to see or to hear everybody else's viewpoints about what went on back then. I mean, I think for me it was rather different things. I never really considered myself to be much of an industry player. Really, I always just kind of trucked along doing my own thing and didn't really go into the whole sort of the billion side of things, really. But my recollection of what happened and why that happened was pretty much tallied with what I was hearing from the people who actually did go into the industry. And yeah, it's a story which is both uplifting and sad at the same time. I think it's certainly very interesting to see, to hear all the voices of all the people involved.
Was it surprising? Was it different then to see yourself within a context of all of the different other stories that are swirling around there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always considered myself to be pretty much an outsider, really, just sort of, like I said, just trucking along doing my own thing and not really giving much of a toss about anything else. And I've somehow got away with it all these years, I don't know how. But yes, it was good to see everybody else's stories interweaved with my own memories. It certainly brought back a lot of memories, and there was a lot of footage there which took me way back. And maybe I wish I was younger and better looking than I am now.
What about Simon Munnery's game that you saw up there, the Hoover sounding?
Well, I mean, I really, you have to thank the man, really, because that was the game which inspired me to start Armoursoft. If it hadn't been for Simon Munnery being absolutely
Simon Munnery, the fantastic comedian.
Yeah, I mean, thank God he chose a very career path, really. I mean, he was not cutting the mustard as a code. Well, I joke about this all the time, but actually, if you look at some of the later work he did on the Spectrum, it's not that bad. He did some vector 3D stuff, which is really was quite impressive for his day. So I know I take the piss out of him all the time, but really, he wasn't that bad of a guy. It's just that was a very bad example of a bad game.
I mean, for me, it's interesting seeing you. I think you're actually the heart and soul of this film. because time just seems to put you at the centre of things. A lot of things that, just looking into your work, once upon a time were seemed out there or strange, like doing a newsletter and releasing games as shareware, are all recognised models now. So, I mean, is there anything that you would suggest, and I'll also ask this one of yourself as well, Nick, that you'd perhaps like to bring back from those early days into now, something that maybe we're missing?
One of the things that I really enjoyed from those early days, which you start to get some of them coming back now, but the old computer exhibitions. I used to have such good times just going there, and it wasn't like a hard marketing sell at all. You just go there, you set up a stand, you play Pink Floyd music all the time, people were coming along. Yeah, we nearly got into trouble so many times because people would come up and say, "Hey Jeff, do you want to join?" And I'm like, "You can't do that."
Stop the filming.
Yeah. We'll go for a little walk around the corner. But I mean, I really miss the social aspect of it. And you do now have large things like the Play Expo, which is really good fun. We're going to that next month. They're good fun. There's kind of some of the spirit of that thing there, but I really miss the kind of very personal one-to-one contact you used to have with the people who were actually playing your games that you got through those shows. Now I suppose you get it a different way. You get it through the internet, you get it through talking to people online. They're in a way, people are much closer to the people who developed the games than they were back then. And there was something special about going to these shows, setting up, showing off all the latest stuff, and just meeting the guys who play the games and hanging out with them and playing doubles with them, and going down the pub with them, and going out to the planetarium and seeing the Pink Floyd laser show with them. Those were just golden times in my life, and I really wish there was something like that again these days.
So, Nick, could I ask you the same question? I mean, obviously, you have
So
a
can
slightly
I?
different perspective.
Sure. So firstly, I think probably the film is going to have generated a lot of people who want facelifts. I know that I'm going to be looking into all that shooting from below. It's the first time I've seen it as well, and I'm glad that it finished on an optimistic note, because I did think it got a little bit whingy in the middle. And I thought it was quite a developer-centric point of view, which is absolutely fair. But actually, we have come full circle a lot with things, and mobile games have really enabled that creativity to come back. But if we didn't have the business, if we didn't have people like me with marketing backgrounds and finance people, we couldn't have created some of the most extraordinary products. So the opening sequence of the graphics in that, compared with where we started, none of that comes without money. And yes, I think creativity has suffered to some extent from that. It certainly had to become more disciplined. But I don't think that in itself is a bad thing. And I think now we do have other platforms that enable people to sort of get back and start, discover that excitement and do some of those great things that they could do to begin with and experiment more. But I also felt that publishers and hardware platforms were taking quite a lot of criticism. Actually, at the end of this has all been driven by consumer choices, what people want to spend their money on, rather than it was somebody, publishers forcing people to buy this, people trying to make people use particular sorts of hardware. The other stuff is in the market, and it's what we've actually been doing is providing consumers with what they want. And I think what's happened with mobile now is shows that consumers don't want just one thing; they want a whole range of things.
But would it be fair to say that the market was less diverse once the consoles started coming together? I mean, that's certainly. I feel as if that's certainly the narrative that's put forward by.
So certainly the games there were a much narrower range of games available on console than there were previously on home computers. But the PC business was going along all the time, and so there's a huge variety there. But actually, there's somebody. I'm sorry that Sega and Nintendo killed the industry. I didn't appreciate that we were doing that at the time. But actually, as the opportunity, and after the OFT investigation and so on, that more publishers were able to put product out, that people were having to take much bigger financial risks on those. And the more product there was, the less certain you were that you were going to get your money back. And I think that If you offer people a choice of 1,000 things, and it's, we're getting this in the internet now, it's very hard for the punter to find actually the thing that they want.
And the guarantee of quality was a very important thing for Sega and Nintendo. I guess it's one of the things, isn't it? There was the explosion of games in the early 80s. The quality led to the drop in quality.
Yeah. I just want to address one of Nick's points there, because Nick's obviously coming at it very much from the publisher point of view, and I actually agreed very much with what he said there. I think what we tried to do with the film was to show an equal balance, so that and we weren't necessarily trying to say that Sega and Nintendo killed the British industry, because that's not actually what happened. What it was that there was a lot of fumbled publishing in the UK. There was a lot of independent publishers in the UK that were, as Steve Turner said in the film, for example, with his own experience with Graphgold, where there was this sort of poor thinking that was going into how to actually get things properly published. And also with the power of those 16-bit consoles, the need was there to create better titles. So, hence there's that line that Andy Payne says in the film, which is, let's not run that down. The consoles grew the market because the consumers required more. So we really had to try and be very careful at that point in the film to create an even balance. So I think what Nick was saying is quite correct, but we also need to accurately show the role of how so many of our developers fell by the wayside. So we needed to understand why. Why did that happen? And a lot of it was at the door of UK publishers, not necessarily that they were burnt out by the overseas consoles or anything. So I just sort of we did agree, but we try. It was always that balancing act, because obviously with 2 hours 20 minutes, you're always trying to sort of make it so that it's you're addressing all the main points. And there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it's interesting seeing the vibrancy and the connection there with the idea of the hobby. I mean, I think Jeff, you said. You thought it would always be a hobby. Would Matthew Smith still be making games now? Would he be on Jet Set? Would he be 54 if it was still a hobby? And if it was still a hobby industry?
I think the fact that Matthew Smith isn't making games anymore is because it became something different than a hobby. I mean, as he said, he got ground up by the machine. If there wasn't a machine, if it still was a hobby, I think he still would be making games. And it's quite sad to see that he's obviously still quite burnt out from the whole thing and isn't really going to get it back into it. I think we lost a great talent there. And I would love to see him come back and start doing stuff again, but I don't know whether that's been ground out of him for good. I certainly hope not. But I think if there was no machine to wind him up, yes, he would probably still be making games.
I mean, so it's really exciting to see we're now going into a period where we're going to have computer science on the school curriculum. But I guess for me, then there's a concern that we're just creating more people for a possible machine. Does anyone have any views on how we can ring fence and make sure that doesn't actually happen, perhaps?
I don't know. The whole thing about the documentary it's a very sad thing. And I don't really feel optimism at the end of it. I know that it would be nice to think there's an optimistic thing, but we haven't learned the lessons of it, not really. The kind of individual brilliance of people like Jeff and other people that kind of fueled a lot of the ideas and the kind of creativity of it doesn't really have an outlet in the way things are done now.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
do you.
So I think that's my opinion. I think that the computer games industry I put quite different to the the kings and the meat molecules of the world. I think they're a completely different industry now, and I don't think there's a kind of a thing between the two. And so I think that a lot of growth is coming outside of the traditional games industry, and the kind of thing that we did, you especially, showed we can't happen anymore.
But that's all on mobile. It is happening. It is. Because with digital distribution, creativity can start in the bedroom now.
Yeah.
Being incredibly diverse, Some of it will hit, some of it we can do for hobbies.
Yeah, but
Can I put that one out to the, can I just put that one out to the audience? I mean, who thinks that, you know, we're in a period where the barrier's being removed again? Raise your hand.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean...
Okay, well, I would completely disagree, for not the reason you think. I think that the explosion in the iPhone platform has come at the cost of PR, and the visibility of games is smaller than ever. You know, so if you're making a game now, yeah, sure you can do it in your bedroom, but you need to be very, very good at PR at the same time. In fact, I'd say probably if you're 80% good at PR and 20% good at games, that's probably the right mix right now. And that's not, you know, that's a different kind of industry.
yeah, I must admit, I agree with you there in the, you know, the mobile phone stuff, especially iOS and Android. It almost seems to me that the success of the game is either random or it's due more to marketing than it is to actually the quality of the game.
What's social media? I was going to ask, do you think the magazines, not that risky, do you think magazines back then were doing a lot of this work for you? When I know we care very deeply about...
They were the game makers. They were the players. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, no question about it.
I mean, Nick, you're... Sorry.
No, because the developers are doing that themselves. Because they're not getting that support from a media, from press.
Well, okay, but when I left the games industry 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I said I wouldn't come back in except as a team of 3. It was me and 2 PR people. You know, and that's like the day of the one-man developer is gone. Because it's a development team plus a whole bunch of people to sell the game.
Okay, I think we're...
So we are publishers now. We're all publishers now.
I'm being told by multiple people to wrap up, which I'm going to do. But we're going to go, I think, possibly over to the Atlas maybe, and continue to talk. Very, very brief chat at the start there. I didn't bring you in as much as I would have liked to. Barely scratched the surface really. But could we give a big round of applause for our team of 3 here?
If you only knew the power of the dark side. 2, 1, 0.